The day the girl came to his door, the wind was carrying dust down the road like it had something to say. It rattled the loose boards of the porch and pressed against the windows, making the old house groan in ways it had not done for years. He stood inside, leaning on the back of a chair, listening to that sound and thinking it matched how his chest felt most mornings, tight, dry, worn down by time. When the knock came, it was soft, almost unsure, and for a moment he wondered if he had imagined it. He opened the door and saw a girl who looked too thin for the weight of the bucket she held. Her coat hung loose on her shoulders, and her face was pale in a way that spoke of long nights and not enough rest. She could not have been more than 14, maybe younger. Her eyes were bright, though, sharp and curious, like she was trying to take in the whole world before it slipped away. She cleared her throat and asked if he needed help cleaning his house. He almost laughed, but the sound caught in his throat. People did not come asking to help him, not anymore. He told her no at first, his voice rough, but she did not step back. She said she could sweep, scrub, wash dishes, anything. She said she would work cheap. As she spoke, she pressed a hand to her side like it hurt to breathe too deep. He noticed then how she shifted her weight, careful and slow, like her body was something fragile she had learned to carry gently. The house behind him was quiet and dim. Dust lay thick on the shelves. Old boots sat by the door, cracked and stiff. The smell of hay and leather clung to the walls, mixed with something older, something lonely. He thought of the days when the house had been loud with voices and laughter, when supper had been warm and waiting. He thought of how long it had been since anyone had crossed his doorway with hope in their eyes. Against his better judgment, he stepped aside and let her in. She set her bucket down and got to work without another word. She moved slowly, but she did not stop. She swept the floor, raising small clouds of dust that made her cough, though she tried to hide it. She wiped the table where his hands had worn the wood smooth. She washed the cups that had been sitting too long. He watched from the doorway, unsure why he had said yes, unsure why her presence made the house feel different, like it was waking up from a long sleep. He asked her where she was from, and she said she lived on the edge of town with her aunt. She did not say much else. When he asked about her cough, she shrugged and said it was nothing. He had heard that word before, used to cover pain that did not want to be named. He told her to rest, but she shook her head and kept working. She said keeping busy helped her forget. Out back, beyond the worn fence, stood the stable. The girl noticed it when she went to dump her dirty water. Her eyes lingered there longer than anywhere else. He told her to stay away from it. His voice came out sharper than he meant. She looked surprised, then nodded, but curiosity does not fade just because it is told to. It waits, it listens. The horse inside that stable was not like others. That was the truth he kept buried, the truth that had driven neighbors away and fed whispers in the town. He had found the horse years ago, half dead near the river, its hide marked with strange scars and its eyes too knowing. When he brought it home, things began to change. Crops grew where they should not. Storms passed over his land and struck elsewhere. At night, the horse would stand still as stone, listening to something no one else could hear. He had tried to sell it once. The buyer took one look and backed away, pale and shaking, saying the animal felt wrong. After that, he kept it hidden. He told people the stable was empty, that he no longer kept stock. He lived quiet, kept his head down, and waited for time to finish what it always did. The horse was both a burden and a promise, though he could not say of what. The girl finished cleaning as the sun dipped low, painting the walls gold. She stood there, breathing hard, sweat on her brow, and smiled like she had done something good. He paid her more than she asked, and her eyes widened. She thanked him, her voice soft, then hesitated. She asked about the stable again, more gently this time. She said she liked horses. They made her feel calm. He told her no, and this time he did not soften it. She left, but she came back the next day and the next. Each time she cleaned a little more, rested a little longer, and asked a few more questions. She brought stories from town, small ones about who was sick and who had moved away. She laughed when he grumbled. Slowly, the house changed. Light found its way into corners it had not touched in years. He found himself waiting for her knock. One afternoon, as she scrubbed the floor, her coughing grew worse. She had to sit down, her face drawn tight with pain. He brought her water and told her she could go. She shook her head, stubborn as any grown hand. She said she needed the work. She said her medicine cost money. He felt something twist inside him then, something old and sharp. He told her she could rest, that he would pay her anyway. She looked at him like she did not quite trust kindness yet. While she rested, a sound came from the stable. A low, steady breath, deep and calm. The girl lifted her head. She asked if there was a horse after all. He said nothing. The sound came again, closer this time, like the animal was standing just behind the wall, listening. The girl stood up slowly, drawn by it, her eyes wide. He moved to block her path, his heart pounding. She stopped, looking up at him, and said something that made his blood run cold. She said the horse sounded lonely. She said she could feel it. He asked how she knew that. She placed a hand over her chest and said when you spend your life feeling weak, you learn to notice quiet things. You learn to listen for what hurts. The wind picked up outside, rattling the fence. The horse stamped once, hard enough to shake dust from the beams. He had never heard it do that before. The girl took a step forward, and for the first time, he did not stop her. Something in the air felt different, charged and waiting like the moment before a storm breaks. As she reached for the stable door, the horse went silent, and he realized, too late, that whatever she was about to see would not stay hidden much longer, and that the secret he had guarded for years was about to choose its own path. The stable door stood between them, old wood darkened by years of sun and dust. The girl's hand hovered inches from the latch, trembling slightly, though whether from fear or weakness he could not tell. He felt the weight of every year he had spent guarding that door pressed down on his shoulders. His voice came out low, almost a warning, as he told her again that she should not go inside. She turned and looked at him, not frightened, just curious and strangely calm, as if the choice had already been made somewhere deeper than words. Before either of them moved, the horse shifted its weight. The sound was slow and heavy, followed by a soft breath that seemed to warm the air. The girl closed her eyes for a moment, like she was listening to something he could not hear. When she opened them, there was a shine there that unsettled him. She said she would not touch anything that she only wanted to see. He thought of the many times he had told himself the same thing, years ago, before he learned how seeing could change a person. He stepped aside, not fully, just enough. The door creaked as it opened, the sound sharp in the quiet afternoon. Dust floated in the beam of light that slipped inside. The stable smelled of hay and earth, clean in a way the house was not. The horse stood in the far stall, tall and still, its dark coat catching the light in uneven patterns. It did not move its head, but its eyes were open, fixed on the girl. She took one step inside and stopped. Her breathing grew shallow as she leaned against the doorframe. He reached out to steady her, but she waved him off. She whispered that it was beautiful. No one had ever used that word for the horse before. Most people avoided describing it at all. He watched her carefully, ready to pull her back if anything went wrong. The horse lowered its head slightly. Just once, it was a small motion, but it felt like a decision. The girl's shoulders relaxed, and for a brief moment, the tightness in her face eased. He saw color return to her cheeks, faint but there. His heart thudded in his chest, not with hope but with fear. He had seen this before, the way the horse reacted to certain people, the way it seemed to reach for something unseen. He told her that was enough, that she should rest. She nodded, though her eyes lingered on the horse as if memorizing it. When they stepped back into the yard, the wind had died down, leaving the world too quiet. He locked the stable door, his hands shaking more than he wanted to admit. The girl sat on the steps, breathing slowly, like she was trying to hold on to a feeling that was already slipping away. She asked him then how long he had owned the horse. He told her he did not own it, not really. He said it had come to him when he needed it, though he did not explain what that meant. She nodded like that made sense. She said sometimes things find people for reasons that do not show themselves right away. The way she said it made him wonder how much a girl her age could already know about waiting and pain. Over the next weeks, her visits became part of his days. She cleaned less and talked more, sitting at the table with a cup of warm water, telling him about her childhood before her parents passed. She spoke of her aunt, kind but tired, and of doctors who shook their heads and offered little. The sickness had been with her for as long as she could remember. Some days were better than others. Some mornings she woke feeling like her lungs were filled with dust. He did not tell her about the nights he spent awake, listening to the horse move in its stall, feeling the pull of memories he tried to forget. Years ago, when his own body had been strong, when the land had answered his hands, the horse had saved him from a sickness that took many others. At least, that was what he told himself. After the fever broke, he found the scars on the horse's side, fresh and bleeding as if it had carried his pain away. That was when he knew the horse was more than it seemed. He had sworn then never to let anyone else get close. Power like that always demanded a price, even if it hid behind kindness. He had seen it drain life from the soil one year only to give it back the next. He had felt it watching him when he made choices that leaned too far toward hope. The horse did not speak, but it had a way of reminding him who was in debt. The girl began to change, slowly enough that he tried to ignore it. Her cough softened, her steps grew steadier. One morning she laughed without stopping to catch her breath, and the sound filled the house like music. He felt a chill run through him. He started finding small things out of place, like the stable door unlocked when he was sure he had locked it, or fresh hay moved as if someone smaller than him had been there. He confronted her one afternoon, his voice harsher than he meant. He asked if she had been going into the stable alone. Her eyes widened, not with guilt, but with fear of losing something precious. She admitted she had gone in once or twice, only to sit and listen. She said the horse made her feel warm inside, like her chest opened instead of closing. She said she had never felt that way before. He told her it was dangerous. He told her she did not understand. She asked him to explain, and he found he could not. How do you explain a secret that even you do not fully understand? How do you tell a sick child that hope can be as cruel as illness? She promised she would stay away, but the promise sounded thin, stretched tight by need. That night he dreamed of the river where he had found the horse, its dark water pulling at his legs. He woke to the sound of breathing outside his window. When he looked, the horse stood near the fence, closer to the house than it had ever been. Its eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight. He felt a pressure in his chest, like the moment before a hard truth lands. The next morning, the girl arrived earlier than usual. She looked stronger, her eyes bright, her voice clear. She said she had not coughed all night. He forced a smile, his stomach heavy. He noticed new marks on the horse later that day, thin lines along its flank, fresh and red. His hands clenched into fists. The balance was shifting again. Word began to spread in town that the sick girl was improving. Neighbors whispered about miracles and blessings. A man came by one evening, asking about the horse he heard was hidden on the property. He said there were people who paid well for rare animals, people who knew how to use them. The man's smile did not reach his eyes. He told him to leave and watched until the dust settled. As the days passed, the girl grew brighter and the horse grew quieter. It stood longer in shadow, its movements slower. He felt the weight of every choice pressing down on him, the past and the present tangled together. He saw the way the girl looked at the future now, like it was something she might actually reach. And he saw the cost written in scars and silence. One evening, as the sun sank low, the girl stood by the stable again, her hand on the door, the same way she had that first day. He knew then that whatever bond was forming could not be undone easily. The wind picked up, carrying dust and distant voices from the road. Somewhere between hope and fear, the horse let out a low sound, not a warning, not a greeting, but something that felt like a call, and he realized the secret was no longer his alone to carry. The wind carried a chill that evening, rustling the trees like quiet voices warning of what was to come. The girl sat on the porch steps, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, her eyes fixed on the fading light across the fields. He watched her from the doorway, trying to guess what she was thinking. She seemed lighter somehow, as though the sickness had loosened its grip just enough for her to breathe, for the first time in months. Yet her presence brought an unease he could not shake. The horse had been restless all day, pawing at the stable floor, ears twitching, eyes shifting toward the horizon. He sensed something stirring, a tension in the air that went beyond ordinary unease. Inside, the house was quiet, but every shadow felt heavier than it should. He kept glancing toward the stable, listening for the soft thud of hooves or the subtle rasp of breath. It was as though the horse had sensed a change, and he feared it was only a matter of time before the secret he had guarded for years would push its way out. The girl, unaware of the full weight of what she was near, hummed softly, brushing dust from the steps, talking to herself about small things, simple hopes. He wanted to warn her, but he could not find the words that would truly capture the danger without sounding crazy. As night fell, he walked toward the stable, lantern in hand. The girl followed at a distance, asking questions in a soft voice that carried both curiosity and caution. He explained what he could about the horse without revealing too much. That it was old, powerful, and not like other horses. That it had been through things most could not imagine, and that its nature demanded respect. She nodded, listening, but her eyes kept wandering toward the stall, bright and full of questions. He remembered the day he had first found the horse, collapsed near the river, shivering and weak from some illness he could not name at the time. Its dark coat had been matted with mud and water, and its eyes had shone with a light he could not understand. He had dragged it home, not knowing if it would live through the night. Somehow it had. Somehow it had survived when many others would have perished. He thought back on the years since then, on the way it had changed things quietly, shifting luck and misfortune, as if it could sense what the world had in store before anyone else could. The girl's health had improved in ways that made him uneasy. She could walk farther, laugh more freely, and even lift a brush without pause. But every time he saw the color return to her cheeks, he felt the weight of something unseen pressing closer. The horse's influence was subtle, a pulse that ran through the land and into the house, affecting those who lingered too long. He had seen it change crops, affect the weather, even alter the paths of strangers passing nearby. He had hoped it would leave him alone, but now its energy seemed drawn to her, pulled by something he could not understand. One afternoon, while she swept the floor, a neighbor came by unexpectedly. A woman, talkative and sharp-eyed, asked about the girl and her visits. She spoke of miracles and whispered blessings, her curiosity laced with suspicion. He tried to brush her off, explaining that the girl was only helping with chores, but the woman's gaze lingered on the stable. Something in her eyes made him uneasy, a kind of understanding that he did not want to see in anyone else. After she left, the girl asked who that was. He shrugged, saying only that some people were too interested in other people's lives. She did not press further, though her small frown suggested she sensed more than he admitted. The horse grew more restless in the following days. It pawed at the ground, stamped its hooves, and nickered in low tones that seemed almost like warnings. The girl noticed, her hand brushing the stable door as if she could feel what the horse was feeling. She said it seemed lonely, that it wanted something. He told her to step back, but she did not. She had learned patience, he realized, but also a daring that made him uneasy. Her frailty had never made her timid. If anything, it sharpened her instincts. She could read subtle signals that most adults would miss, and now those instincts were drawing her closer to the horse's hidden nature. Late one evening, he found her sitting on the ground outside the stable, sketching the horse on scraps of paper she had brought from home. He had never seen anyone approach it this way, calm, careful, full of respect, but also with a quiet determination to understand. Her pencil moved slowly, capturing the curve of its neck, the strength in its legs, the depth in its eyes. He felt a twinge of fear. Once people understood too much, the balance shifted, and he was not sure if anyone could survive what came next. He began to recall stories from the town, fragments of old tales passed down, about animals with unusual abilities, about humans who had encountered forces they could not comprehend. Some ended in wonder, others in disaster. He had dismissed them as children's tales once, but the horse had proven the stories were rooted in something real. And now the girl, fragile and persistent, had entered that world, walking a line between healing and danger. He worried that the longer she stayed, the more irreversible the change would become. At the same time, he noticed changes in the girl beyond her health. She smiled more freely, spoke with a confidence that had been absent, and seemed attuned to rhythms he could not hear. He found her humming tunes that carried through the house, tunes that somehow soothed the horse. Once, He caught her talking softly to it in a voice almost too quiet for him to hear. It responded to her words, its eyes softening in a way he had never seen with anyone else. The bond was growing, and he feared its consequences. The tension between secrecy and exposure built like a storm cloud over the property. One afternoon, a stranger rode past the house on a horse, stopping at the edge of the field to look toward the stable. The girl noticed, her face tightening with worry. He felt the old pulse of fear in his chest, the same pulse that had warned him when others had come seeking the horse. The stranger did not approach, but his presence alone felt like a ripple that could grow into a wave. The horse shifted in the stall, ears forward, head high, as if aware of the outside threat. He clenched his fists, realizing that hiding the secret might no longer be enough. At night he lay awake, listening to the creak of the house and the soft sounds from the stable. The girl's breathing was steady, peaceful, but he could not rest. Shadows moved differently now. Every wind gust felt deliberate, every distant sound suspicious. The horse's quiet presence was both comforting and terrifying. He remembered the first time it had saved him, the first time it had changed the course of something he thought was beyond repair. He understood, finally, that whatever this animal could do, it demanded attention, sacrifice, and careful handling, or lives could be appended. Meanwhile, the girl had started keeping a journal. She wrote about the chores, about the quiet moments with the horse, about feelings she had never fully expressed before. He found the notebook one afternoon by accident and read a few lines, feeling a shiver run down his spine. She described the horse's gaze in ways that made it feel like a living, breathing force of awareness. She wrote of emotions that had been locked inside her, now flowing through her in ways that unsettled him. There was wonder in her words, but also something he could not name, an understanding of the horse's secret that went deeper than he thought possible. The days blurred together, each one marked by small progress in her health and increasing intensity in the horse's behavior. It became protective, following her with its eyes, shifting whenever she approached the stable. He noticed her laughter was changing the atmosphere, stirring things in the land and air he could not explain. The balance that had once been manageable now felt fragile. One wrong step, one moment of trust misplaced, could unravel years of careful guarding. And yet, he found himself hoping, quietly, against every instinct, that maybe this time the change could be good. One evening, a sudden storm rolled in from the horizon, dark clouds swallowing the sky. The wind tore through the trees, rattling windows and sending loose boards clanging. The horse neighed sharply from the stable, panic in its tone. The girl ran to the door, reaching for it before he could stop her. He shouted, warning her of danger, but she ignored him. She was drawn to the stall, to the horse, to the secret that pulsed like a heartbeat under the roof. He could only follow, knowing that tonight the quiet tension that had held the house in place for years would finally erupt, and neither of them would be able to turn back from whatever waited inside. The storm tore across the fields like a living thing, the wind howling in sudden bursts that rattled the roof and shook the trees. Rain fell in sheets, heavy and cold, driving them all indoors, or at least trying to. He had never seen weather like this so suddenly. The horse, sensing the change, pawed at the stable floor, its hooves striking the wood with a rhythm that echoed like distant drums. The girl stood at the door, hands gripping the frame, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. He shouted warnings, but her focus was only on the dark stall where the animal waited, silent yet alert, muscles coiled as though it knew the storm would bring more than rain. Lightning flashed, illuminating the space between them for a heartbeat. And in that instant, he saw the horse shift its weight in a way that made the ground tremble faintly beneath his boots. It was more than an animal, more than he had ever admitted, even to himself. He felt a cold fear settle into his chest, the kind that made every instinct scream to pull the girl away, to lock the stable door and leave everything as it had been. But she did not move, did not flinch. Her hand reached for the latch, trembling but determined, and something about her courage made him hesitate. The wind roared, carrying the scent of wet earth and something wilder, almost electric. He stepped closer, hand outstretched, trying to stop her, but the moment had already begun to shift. The horse's eyes glowed faintly in the shadow, reflecting light from the storm. There was awareness there, sharp and piercing, and he realized the animal was watching not him, not the girl, but something else entirely, something moving just beyond the trees, perhaps drawn by the stir of power he had long tried to contain. The girl whispered a question, barely audible over the wind, asking if the horse had always been like this. He shook his head, uncertain how to answer without revealing truths too dangerous for her to carry. She tilted her head, listening to the rain and the low rumble of hooves, as though she could sense the weight of years pressing down on the stable. He had seen that expression before on people who stumbled upon secrets meant to remain hidden. She was on the edge of understanding something that could change everything. A sudden crack of thunder made the lantern swing wildly, casting shadows that danced across the walls. The horse neighed, a sound full of both warning and longing. The girl froze, staring at it as though she expected it to speak, to reveal something she had long felt but never named. He grabbed her shoulder lightly, urging her to step back, but she shook him off, eyes fixed on the stall. He felt a surge of panic rise, knowing that if she crossed that threshold, the forces at play would be impossible to control. He thought back to the stories his father had whispered when he was a boy, tales of animals carrying secrets of people touched by power too great to manage. At the time, he had scoffed. Now, watching the storm bend the trees and hearing the low, dangerous growl from the horse, he knew the stories had been warnings. He understood that this moment was the culmination of years of waiting, of guarding, of hoping that the world would leave them alone. And yet the girl, fragile, sickly, but fierce in spirit, had come and pressed against the edges of what could no longer be hidden. The storm intensified, rain pelting the roof, thunder shaking the foundation. He noticed movement outside the yard, shadows flitting just beyond the fence, shapes too large to be birds or deer. His pulse quickened. He knew immediately that the secret the horse had kept safe for so long was now attracting attention, and that those who came were not here for curiosity or kindness. He whispered to the girl to step back again, to trust him this once, but her eyes held a determination he had rarely seen. She understood the danger, maybe even more than he did, and yet she did not step away. Lightning split the sky again, closer this time, and for a fraction of a second, he saw the horse lean forward, ears pinned, nostrils flaring. Its body was tense, muscles coiled like a spring, ready to move in an instant. The girl reached out, voice shaking, and called its name softly. The horse paused, a moment of decision hanging between them, before stamping the ground in a warning that rattled the old boards. He felt the tension tighten in his chest, realizing that once the girl touched it, the balance would tip and not necessarily in their favor. The wind carried a new sound, faint but distinct, the crack of hooves on hard ground outside the fence, slower than the rain, measured, deliberate. Someone or something was approaching. He turned his head briefly to look, catching glimpses of dark shapes moving through the trees, their intent heavy in the charged air. The horse stiffened, pressing back against the stall door as if ready to defend, and the girl, sensing the shift, froze. Her hand hovered over the latch, unsure whether to open or retreat. Every instinct screamed to stay away, to hide, to protect the secret that had taken years to guard. But curiosity, courage, and something deeper pulled her forward. He took a step closer, trying to shield her from whatever waited in the storm. The shadows pressed closer, indistinct but massive, and he could hear whispers in the wind that chilled his blood. The horse neighed again, a deep, rolling sound that seemed to vibrate in the ground itself. He felt the hairs on his arms stand on end. He realized with a jolt that this was no ordinary threat. The horse had warned him many times before of danger, but never with this urgency. And the girl, standing there, pale but resolute, seemed unaware that the storm outside was not just weather, it was consequence, moving in to claim what had been hidden for years. The rain hammered harder, soaking the porch and drenching the girl's coat. Her hair clung to her face, but she did not flinch. She whispered again, asking if the horse could protect them. He swallowed hard, knowing that he could not answer. He had relied on the horse's power before, yes, but he also knew its secrets were dangerous, unpredictable. It had saved him in the past, yes, but it demanded something in return, and he feared that if they crossed this threshold, the cost would be higher than either of them could bear. Suddenly, the stable door creaked under pressure. The horse shifted sharply, eyes wide, nostrils flaring. He lunged forward, trying to steady the door, but it moved anyway, swaying as though drawn by some force beyond his control. The girl gasped, stepping back slightly, her hands shaking as she clutched the porch railing. The shadows outside the fence seemed to ripple with anticipation, and for the first time, he wondered if the secret had been too long confined, if it had been waiting for someone like her all along, or for something worse to find them first. A flash of lightning illuminated the yard in stark white light, and in that instant, he saw everything: the girl, the horse, the approaching shapes beyond the fence, and the storm that bent the trees like they were made of paper. He felt the tension tighten in his chest, his breath coming in short, sharp bursts. The horse pawed the ground again, its body coiled, eyes fixed, ears pinned. The girl's lips moved in a soft, urgent whisper, calling to it in a way that made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. It was as though she had unlocked something, or perhaps the horse had recognized her, and in that recognition everything changed. The shadows shifted closer. The wind screamed, carrying with it the scent of rain, earth, and something sharper, something dangerous. The horse neighed once more, louder this time, a sound that seemed to shake the very air, and he realized that the moment of decision had arrived. The girl's hand hovered over the stable door, the latch trembling under her grip. He could see the conflict in her eyes: fear, curiosity, hope, and an undeniable courage. The storm raged around them, the shadows pressed closer, and the horse waited, still, coiled, knowing what was coming before any of them could speak. He stepped forward, ready to pull her back, ready to defend the secret that had taken years to protect. But she did not move. Her eyes met his, steady and unyielding, and for the first time he felt powerless. The horse shifted again, muscles tense, breath heavy, ears forward. The wind tore through the yard, and the approaching shapes beyond the fence grew larger, darker, more distinct. And then, in the flash of another lightning strike, the world seemed to pause, the storm hanging in midair, as though holding its breath for the next moment, the moment when everything would finally be revealed. The storm seemed to pause in that moment, the wind holding its breath as the girl's hand rested lightly on the stable door. The horse stood motionless, its dark eyes fixed on her with a depth that made the world feel small and fragile. Beyond the fence, the shadows had stopped moving, as though whatever had been drawn by the storm sensed the change too. He watched her, unsure whether to pull her back or let her take the step he had long feared. Something in the way she looked at the horse told him she understood, in a way that words could never capture, that this was no ordinary animal, no ordinary moment. With a slow, deliberate motion, she eased the door open. The horse shifted forward, its breath warm and steady, and for the first time, the tension that had clung to the yard for years seemed to loosen. She reached out, hand trembling slightly, and the horse nuzzled her gently, a soft, careful movement that made her laugh softly, a sound like sunlight breaking through clouds. He felt the weight in his chest ease slightly, though he knew better than to assume that the danger had passed. The storm outside began to settle, raindrops pattering softly on the roof instead of striking in angry sheets, and a quiet sense of calm filled the space between them. The shapes beyond the fence slowly faded into the trees, drawn back by the sudden peace. He realized then that the horse's presence had done more than protect the girl, it had repelled the curiosity and danger that had crept toward them. He had underestimated how much of its power depended not just on secrecy, but on trust. And somehow, in reaching out to the horse, the girl had proven herself worthy. She had not feared, and in that courage the house and the land felt lighter, as if old burdens had begun to lift. Days passed after that night, each one brighter than the last. The girl continued to clean and help, but now there was laughter in the house, and she moved with strength that had been absent for months. He found himself watching her, not with worry, but with quiet admiration, realizing that the small, determined acts she had done, the sweeping, the scrubbing, the patience, had built more than a clean home. They had built trust, a fragile bond that tied her, him, and the horse together. Every time she called to the animal, every time it responded to her gentle voice, the bond grew stronger. The house itself seemed a sigh in relief, dust settling, light lingering longer in the corners. Neighbors began to notice subtle changes too. Crops grew healthier, the yard seemed brighter, and the air felt warmer in ways that could not be explained. A few came by, curious but respectful, asking small questions about the girl and the horse. He spoke cautiously, telling only what he needed to, careful not to reveal the full truth, and the girl's presence quietly answered the unspoken questions. She had changed not just the house, but the way the world around them seemed to move. People began to whisper, but now their voices carried wonder instead of suspicion. One afternoon, the girl and he stood together by the stable, watching the horse move gracefully through its stall. She leaned against the doorframe, pale but strong, and asked him about the first time he had found it by the river. He told her the story of mud and shivering, of fear and hope tangled together. She listened, eyes wide, and then she asked the question he had dreaded. Why had he kept it hidden for so long? He hesitated, then told her the truth. That some things are too powerful to share carelessly, that secrets must be guarded, and that even goodness carries risk. She nodded, understanding more than her years should allow. In the weeks that followed, they formed a quiet routine. She cleaned, she rested, she laughed, and slowly he began to teach her the small ways of the land, the feel of soil in his hands, the subtle signals of the weather, the way to read the horse's movements. She learned quickly, guided by patience and curiosity. The horse seemed to sense her growth, standing calmly while she brushed it, letting her stroke its mane and whisper in ways that would have made him hold his breath years ago. For the first time, he felt like he could step back and let another soul share the burden of guarding the secret. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange, he found the girl sitting on the porch steps with her journal. She had been writing again, filling pages with sketches and thoughts about the horse, about the house, about life as she had never known it before. She looked up and smiled at him, eyes bright and steady, and for the first time in a long while, he smiled back without worry or doubt. The house was alive again, not just with people and chores, but with trust and care, and even the horse seemed to sense the ease in the air. A soft knock came at the door one morning. It was a neighbor, timid but smiling, holding a basket of fresh vegetables. The girl ran to greet her, cheeks flushed with excitement, and he followed slowly, watching the interaction with a quiet pride. Word was spreading, not in whispers of fear, but in stories of hope. People spoke of the girl who had healed herself and the house she had touched, and while he knew the horse's true nature remained a secret, he also understood that not all wonders needed explanation to be respected. The horse became a quiet guardian, moving freely in the stable, responding to the girl's calls and presence. No longer restless or tense, it seemed to know that the danger had passed, that trust had been earned, and that the balance between power and patience had been restored. He often caught himself watching them together, the girl smiling as she fed it, brushing its mane, and talking softly, and he realized that the horse's secret had not only changed the girl, it had changed him. He had learned to let go, to share, and to trust in the unexpected courage of a young, sickly girl who had refused to be defined by her weakness. In time, the house transformed fully. Dust gave way to warmth, shadows receded, and the garden outside began to bloom in ways that seemed almost magical. The girl's health continued to improve, and her laughter became a steady rhythm in the house, matching the horse's calm breathing. He realized that life could still hold surprises, that healing could be found in unlikely places, and that trust and care could turn even the heaviest burdens into shared strength. On quiet nights, when the wind was gentle and the stars hung low and bright in the sky, he would sit on the porch and watch the girl and the horse move together in the stable. Sometimes she would hum softly, and the horse would respond with a low nicker, a sound that carried across the yard and filled the night with calm. He felt a deep gratitude, not just for the girl's courage, but for the way life had given him another chance to see hope bloom in a place that had once been lonely and dark. The girl finally spoke the words that he had longed to hear, words that made him realize the depth of the change she had brought. She said the house felt like a home now, the horse felt like family, and she no longer felt defined by illness. She had discovered strength inside herself she had not known existed, and she had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. He nodded quietly, heart swelling, understanding that she had changed everything, not just for herself, but for everyone who called this land home. As the sun set on the horizon, casting warm light across the fields, he watched the girl walk toward the stable, the horse following calmly behind. He realized that the greatest secret of all was not in the animal, nor in the storm, nor even in the house, but in the simple acts of care, trust, and persistence that had healed them both. The land seemed to breathe in quiet approval, the trees swaying gently in the evening breeze, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel peace. The girl's laughter, the horse's steady presence, and the warmth of a home reborn created a harmony he had never thought possible. The story of that sick girl who cleaned his house, the horse whose secret changed their lives, and the quiet house that had been touched by courage and care came to a close not with fanfare or spectacle, but with steady, human moments. The girl, now stronger and full of life, the horse, calm and watchful, and he, finally learning to trust and let go, formed a bond that would carry them forward. And though the world beyond the fence continued, unpredictable and wild, the house stood as a testament to hope, resilience, and the quiet power of connection, leaving behind lessons that would linger in hearts and minds long after the storm had passed.